The high desert air in Kamaz, Utah is thin and cold, even in March. In 2022, the town was the kind of place where people moved to find peace. A rough, wealthy area where the mountains stood like a jagged wall against the mess of the outside world. Eric Richins fit right in. He was a man of the land, a successful stonemason and business owner who built a life on real solid ground. He was fit, he was a loving father to three young boys, and by all outside views, he was living the American dream. But on the night of March 3rd, that dream turned into a nightmare. Kouri Richins, his wife of 9 years, told police the night began with celebration. She had closed a major deal for her growing real estate business, a huge multi-million-dollar mansion that she saw as her ticket to the big leagues. To celebrate, she brought Eric another drink in bed. It was a Moscow Mule, vodka, ginger beer, lime, served in the classic copper mug. It's a spicy, strong drink, perfect for hiding a bitter aftertaste. Kouri told investigators she left the room shortly after to comfort one of their sons who was having a night terror. She claimed she fell asleep in the child's room, and when she returned to her own bedroom around 3 a.m., she found Eric. He was cold. He wasn't breathing. She told the 911 dispatcher she performed CPR, but it was too late. Eric Richins, at just 39 years old, was declared dead at the scene. At first, the community mourned. They saw a young widow left with 3 small boys. They saw a woman grieving so loudly that she eventually wrote a book to help her children understand why their father wasn't coming home. But behind the scenes, the first cracks were showing in the story. When the medical examiner's report came back, the grief turned into a chilling mystery. Eric Richins hadn't died of a heart attack. He hadn't died of a stroke. He had died from an overdose of illegal fentanyl. And it wasn't a small amount. The level of fentanyl in his system was 5 times the deadly dose. Even more disturbing, it hadn't been injected, it hadn't been snorted, it had been swallowed. It was in his stomach. It was in the drink. But things were about to get much worse. The investigation didn't just start with the body. It started with Eric's family. While the police were still processing the scene, Eric's sisters were already pointing the finger. They didn't see a grieving widow. They saw a woman who had spent years trying to control Eric's money. They told detectives a story that changed the entire direction of the case. Eric had survived his wife's cooking before. Years earlier, on a trip to Greece, Eric had become very sick after Kouri gave him a drink. He survived, but he was shaken. Then came Valentine's Day, 2022, just weeks before his death. Kouri had brought him a sandwich. After one bite, Eric broke out in hives. He couldn't breathe. He had to use his son's EpiPen and take a large dose of Benadryl before passing out for hours. When he woke up, he called his sister. He didn't say he was sick. He said, "I think my wife is trying to poison me." The question for investigators was no longer what killed Eric Richins. It was how a suburban mother of 3 managed to get her hands on enough street fentanyl to kill a man 5 times over. As detectives began a forensic sweep of Kouri's phone, they found a digital trail that led straight to the dark side of the drug trade. They found that Kouri had been in contact with a woman named in court papers as CL, a former housekeeper who had a history of drug charges. The messages weren't about cleaning houses. Between December 2021 and February 2022, Kouri began asking for prescription pain medication for a claimed back injury. But the requests quickly grew more serious. She told CL that she wanted something stronger. She asked directly for some of that Michael Jackson stuff, meaning the powerful sedatives and opioids that led to the pop star's death. On February 11th, Kouri allegedly met CL and paid $900 for 15 to 30 fentanyl pills. 3 days later, Eric had his near fatal reaction to the Valentine's Day sandwich. But it seems the sandwich wasn't enough. On February 26th, Kouri reached out again. She wanted more. She bought another $900 worth of pills. 6 days later, Eric was dead. Then, investigators found something they couldn't explain. While Kouri was allegedly getting these pills, she was also carefully wiping her phone. She was deleting messages, clearing call logs, and trying to erase her digital trail. But she wasn't careful enough. Investigators found that on the night of Eric's death, there were big gaps in her phone's activity that didn't match her story. She claimed she stayed in her son's room until 3 a.m., but her phone showed it being picked up, unlocked, and used many times during the hours she said she was asleep. She was checking messages. She was active, and she was possibly waiting for the poison to work. But the why was still missing. Why kill a husband who brought in money? Why destroy a family that looked so perfect on Instagram? The answer was found in a pile of hidden debt and a secret fight over a life insurance policy. While the toxicology reports and the Michael Jackson drug deal showed the how, the motive was buried in a pile of paperwork. To the neighbors in Kamas, Kouri Richins was a successful real estate business owner. She drove the right cars, lived in a beautiful home, and showed an image of total financial security. But investigators soon found that Kouri's business was a house of cards. And it was leaning heavily on Eric's hard-earned success. The money problems ran deep. Papers later showed that Kouri was carrying over $1.8 million in debt. She had taken out many hard money loans, some with interest rates that were unfair. She owed money to contractors. She owed money to the IRS. And she was allegedly faking Eric's signature on power of attorney papers to take out lines of credit against his properties without his knowledge. Kouri had a dream. She wanted to buy a $2 million mansion, a fixer-upper on a big scale, to flip for a huge profit. Eric, the practical stonemason, had put his foot down. He told her they couldn't afford it. He told her the market was too risky. To Kouri, Eric wasn't just a husband. He was a barrier to her goals. But things were about to get much worse. In January 2022, just 2 months before his death, Eric found out how badly he had been betrayed. He learned that Kouri had taken out a $250,000 home equity line of credit and spent it all. He learned she had taken over $100,000 from his bank accounts to pay off her own credit card bills. The fight that followed was said to be intense. Eric didn't file for divorce right away. He wanted to protect his 3 sons. But he did something much more careful. He went to his lawyer and quietly changed his will and his living trust. He took Kouri off as the person who would get his estate and his $2 million life insurance policy. Instead, he named his sister Katie as the trustee. He told his family that if anything happened to him, they needed to make sure Kouri didn't get anything. He was basically living in a house with a woman he knew was stealing from him, while she was living with a man she knew was worth more to her dead than alive. On the night Eric died, the celebratory Moscow Mule wasn't just a drink. It was a $2 million insurance claim in a copper mug. The most chilling chapter of this story began after Eric was in the ground. In the months following his death, Kouri didn't retreat into private mourning. Instead, she stepped into the spotlight. She wrote a children's book titled Are You With Me? The book was meant to help children deal with the sudden loss of a parent. It showed a father, a man who looked a lot like Eric, watching over his boys from heaven. Kouri went on a media blitz. She appeared on local news shows, smiling warmly, talking about how her heart was broken, but how she was staying strong for her boys. My husband passed away unexpectedly, she told a TV reporter. It completely took us by surprise. It's been the hardest thing my family has ever gone through. To the public, she was a hero mom. To the detectives, watching those interviews, she was a master of performance. While she was on camera talking about grief, she was also locked in a legal fight with Eric's sister. Kouri had tried to claim the insurance money and the estate, only to find out she had been locked out by Eric's secret trust. When she realized the money wasn't coming, her behavior shifted from grieving widow to aggressive litigant. She sued Eric's estate. She tried to force the sale of his family business. She was desperate for the cash she thought she had secured on the night of March 3rd. Then, investigators found something they couldn't explain. During a search of her home, they found Kouri's own journals. In them, she didn't write about missing Eric. She wrote about her problems with his family and her fixation with the money. But the true smoking gun wasn't in a journal. It was in the digital records of her laptop. Days after Eric's funeral, while her children were supposed to be grieving, Kouri was searching for things like, can the police see deleted messages? How to find fentanyl in a toxicology report? And what is considered a lethal dose of fentanyl? She wasn't just a writer of children's books. She was a student of her own crime. The investigation had been a slow burn, a year-long game of cat and mouse played out in quiet police stations and through subpoenaed bank records. But on May 8th, 2023, the mask finally fell. Kouri Richins was arrested at her home and charged with first-degree aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. The image of the grieving author was replaced by a mugshot that spread across the globe. The woman who had been teaching the world how to mourn was now accused of being the cause of the very tragedy she wrote about. When the detention hearing started, the prosecution presented a case that was even more planned than the public thought. They didn't just have the drug dealer's testimony. They had the cold, hard data from Kouri's phone. They showed that Kouri had been searching for luxury prisons for the rich. And can the FBI find deleted messages on WhatsApp? Her belief in her own smarts had been her ultimate downfall. But things were about to get much worse. During the hearing, Eric's family sat in the front row, finally able to speak their truth. They described a man who was scared in his final weeks. They shared that Eric had changed the logs on his house and hadn't told Kouri. He was living a double life, playing the role of the husband while secretly building a legal wall to keep his children safe from their mother's money problems. The prosecution also brought forward the house at the center of the motive. The 22,000 square foot mansion Kouri wanted to flip was more than just a business deal. It was an obsession. They showed evidence that Kouri had signed the closing papers on that mansion just one day after Eric's death. She didn't even wait for the funeral. She used the moment of his passing to push through the very deal he had died to prevent. Then, investigators found something they couldn't explain. In a shocking courtroom twist, the defense tried to argue that Eric himself was a drug user. They suggested he had gotten the fentanyl on his own to manage chronic pain. But the state's experts shot that down right away. There was no user paraphernalia in the house. There were no needles, no burnt spoons, no history of addiction in his medical records. And, most importantly, people who use fentanyl for fun don't typically swallow a massive, deadly dose in a single celebratory drink. The judge looked at the evidence, the hidden deaths, the fake signatures, the Michael Jackson drug buys, and the children's book written with the blood of the victim, and ordered Kouri to be held without bail. As she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked back at her family, her face a mask of shock. The woman who thought she could write the ending to her own story had finally run out of ink. The case of Kouri Richins remains one of the most chilling examples of the killer in the house. It reminds us that sometimes the person holding the pen or the drink is the one we should fear the most. The 22,000 square foot mansion stands empty, a symbol of a greed that destroyed a family. Eric's 3 sons are being raised by his family, living with the painful truth that their mother's book was a lie and their father's love was the only thing that tried to save them. The investigation into the Moscow Mule murder keeps bringing new details about the acquaintances Kouri used to buy her poison. It serves as a warning to those who think the digital world can be wiped clean. Every search, every deleted text, and every secret loan is a footprint that leads back to the truth. In the end, Kouri Richins wanted to be famous. She wanted to be a best-selling author and a real estate mogul. She got fame, but not the kind she wanted. She is now the central figure in a warning story about the meeting of ambition, debt, and cold-blooded murder. But the evidence was just the beginning. As the trial date gets closer, the world waits to see if there are even more secrets buried in the mountain of evidence. The buried truth files will be there to cover every update, every testimony, and every revelation. What do you think was the most planned out part of Kouri's scheme? Was it the drug deal or the boldness of the children's book? Let us know in the comments below. Your ideas help us look deeper into these cases. If you found this story disturbing, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. We go beyond the headlines to find the facts that stay hidden. This has been a production of Buried Truth.